Shri Gurubhyo Namah. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Global Festival of Oneness. Let me begin with a small prayer. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Parampara Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Today we have with us Neema Majmudar ji. Welcome back, Neema ji, for the program. This will be third session by Neema ji on a very interesting text, Sadachara, by Adi Shankaracharya ji. A very less studied but very important text for cultivation of Vedantic, interiorization of Vedantic knowledge in a day-to-day life. For Nididhyasana and for Manana, it's a very important text. Before we go forward, I just want to give a very brief introduction to Neema ji for those who are new. Neema Majmudar ji has a unique combination of personal background, international exposure, education, and depth of spiritual knowledge, which makes her an inspiring writer and teacher of Indian philosophy. She has studied Indian philosophy, especially Advaita Vedanta, under Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji, and she has a number of years of experience as a professional with the United Nations in the field of economic and social development as well. And she has a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University. Since 1999, Neema ji has been giving various conferences, conducting seminars, retreats across the world in the domain of personal development and philosophy. Along with her husband Surya Tahora, she conducts retreats and seminars wherein she incorporates concepts of Indian philosophy with Western psychology, ethics, physics, neurobiology, and management. And she has been regularly taking Vedanta classes both in offline and online mode. And they have also authored many books. Neema ji has authored many books. And one of the books that she and Surya ji have authored together is titled Living the Vision of Oneness, which expounds the vision of Bhagavad Gita and how it can be used in a daily life. Recently, I think last year, Neema ji and two of her students, they have published a beautifully illustrated book titled Finding Meaning in Life with Bhagavad Gita. Very warm welcome to you, Neema ji. Thank you for coming on our program. You can start your session now.
Yes, thank you so much, Nitin ji. Thank you very much. So I start the session. I have many verses to complete. So, okay. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavadpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So last time we saw that we have to negate the body, mind, sense complex as our true nature, because that is undergoing a constant change. Then that which is the invariable, right, in whose presence different conditions of the body, mind, and the senses are known is chit, and that chit is not individual to you, but it is universal, and it is the truth of everything. So that is what we saw. Now we go to verse number 22. Shabdasya adi antayoho siddham manasaha api tatha eva madhye sakshitaya nityam tat eva tvam brahmam jahi. Okay, so what is explained is that what we identify the most is our mind, and mind is nothing but many different thoughts, and those thoughts are coming and going. But what is interesting is they come and go, so therefore it cannot be your intrinsic nature. The definition of intrinsic nature is that you can't be without it. So the fact that it comes and goes and you still survive, it means that it is your incidental nature, but not your true nature. Now the words, so what is the relationship? And this is something that we really need to understand very clearly. Because when you are told that you are not the mind, what people generally do is, oh, this is the thought, and there must be some consciousness which is behind, which in whose presence this thought is known. So they create a distance. But in this non-duality, there can't be a distance between mind and consciousness. If there was a distance, what will happen? Consciousness becomes located in a given place away from the mind. So that cannot be the case. So what we have to understand is that thoughts are forms, and the content of that form is consciousness. So what does it mean? Ring is a form, and the content of the ring is gold, and gold is in and through the ring, but it is free from being the ring. So ring cannot exist without gold, but gold is independent of being the ring. Similarly, every thought is, the content of every thought is a form. The content is consciousness, but consciousness doesn't become any thought. And this is why you can keep changing your thought. If consciousness became a given thought, that thought will stick to it. But what we see is we can just keep thinking about so many different things, so that what it shows is that the form, which is a thought, cannot do anything to consciousness. Consciousness, being the truth, cannot be touched by a thought form. So this is something which needs to be understood. So Sakshi, literally, even though this verse uses the word Sakshi, the Sakshi is generally what we call witness. But as I told you, please don't think that there is this thought which is coming and going, and consciousness away from all these thoughts is a witness, right? It is in and through, without which thought cannot take place, but itself is free from it. Okay. So number 23. 23 is a very interesting verse, because we keep connecting our identity, right, to a given individual, which keeps us from understanding our true nature as that universal Jagat Karanam Brahma, right? It's not some small the consciousness which is away from your body and mind. So in order to show that, a very important the verse which shows that it is universal reality. So let's read it. Sthulaihi sthula vairajayoho aikyam sukshma hiranya garbhayoho agnana mayayoho ekyam pratyak vignana purnayoho. So what is this consciousness that we are talking about, which is in and through, which is the invariable presence through your thought? That is that which is the final building block of the universe, which is the final truth from which everything comes. So now you can say, what does everything mean? What does it mean that everything comes from it? So in this particular verse, he says everything is divided into three. One is your physical body, which has a name called Vishwa. This is based on Mandukya Upanishad. There is an individual and the name that is given to this individual is Vishwa, and that is what we call your physical body. Now, your physical body and can interact with physical universe. So there is, so physical body is called Vyashti, the individual, and the entire physical universe, which includes the stars, the sun, the moon, all the species, all the planets, everything physical, that is called Samashti Sthula, and that is given the name Virat. So the physical universe is divided into you, the individual physical body, and then the entire physical universe, which is Virat. Now, that doesn't include everything. In addition to that, there is what we call Sukshma. So our Sukshma Sharira includes what the capacity of our senses, capacity of our organs of action, our prana, our mind. All of this is part of our subtle. So your individual subtle is called Tejasa. And the Samashti subtle, which includes not only your mind and your senses, but also the senses and mind of a bird and a fish and other individuals, which are all very different. So that is what we call Samashti Sukshma, that is called Hiranyagarbha. Now, you can ask, how does, your individual physical and subtle body come, and how does the entire physical universe and how does the entire subtle universe come about? So it has its basis in the causal. So the particular individual physical body and subtle body comes because of one's karma, or the account that one has, which is part of the causal, which is called prajna. And the entire samashti causal is called Maya, right? So Maya contains all the information about all, not only individual causes, but all the causes. And what does it do? It creates the subtle and physical universe for all of us to interact with and gather our experiences. And also based on how we act, what it gives us the result. So this is what all three. So what individual, Vishwa, Tejasa, and Prajna. And at Samashti level, what Virat, Hiranyagarbha, and Maya. All of these what are the superimposed, what means they all come from this one reality, which is this consciousness. And where is this consciousness available? It is the content of every thought of yours. It is always present with you. But what happens is you don't recognize, you don't own up this reality, and you confuse yourself with thoughts which are momentary. So in this particular verse, Lord Adi Shankaracharya ji very clearly explains that the consciousness that is Brahman. And what does it mean? It is the basis of both Vyashti and Samashti, physical, subtle, and causal. Now, 24, verse number 24, talks about Chinmatra Eka Rase Vishnu Brahma Atma Aikya Swarup Ke Brahmena Eva Jagat Jatam Rajvam Sarpa Brahmaha Yatha. So now what is being talked about is that how from on this one consciousness, the entire universe is the manifestation from this consciousness. So what, and that universe is what the Brahman has not undergone any change to become the universe. It is as it is, and there is no real addition. The addition is only the names and forms. So what is the example that is given? Rope is just a rope, right? But it appears as a snake. And then what happens is we all start believing that it is snake. And what does it do? It kind of conceals the reality, which is rope. And what happens as a result of this error? So what we have fear, we try to run away. So these are the effects of the error that we make. And similarly, so what happens is this consciousness is the one from which, as I told you, both the Vyashti and Samashti universe has come into being, and they are all just projections. They are manifestation of this reality. We forget this reality, and we begin to think that the Jagat is real, and we start living from this superimposition. Now, one thing is very, very important, that, there is a slight, of course, everything is from Brahman, but, and everything which depends upon Brahman gets a technical name called Mithya. But our Shastra talks about two Mithya, two types of Mithya. One is Pratibhasika and other is Vyavaharika. So what is a Pratibhasika? Rajju Sarpaha is Pratibhasika. So not everybody may mistake a rope for a snake. Only some people may mistake a rope for a snake. So this is what we call our personal superimposition, right? Everybody doesn't see it like that. Whereas the clay and pot is, right, while the pot entirely depends upon clay for its existence, and clay is independent, but you can't say that a pot is totally an illusion like what the snake is. So that is what we call Vyavaharika Satta. It has a Vyavaharika Satta. So it has empirical reality, but it is not the absolute reality. So this is why, so you can't call the world as complete illusion. We have to call it as Mithya. And Mithya means that there is some empirical truth to it. And what does it mean? There is a body and it has a backache and it has all its whatever, it has its happiness, and also there is sun, there is moon, there are trees. You can't say everything is just my imagination. It's not an imagination. It is Ishvara Srishti. Even though it is Ishvara Srishti, in terms of its ontological reality, it is Mithya, because it depends upon this Brahman for its existence. And the entire universe is superimposed on this reality. Okay, so that is the verse number 24, that Chinmatra Ekarase, that all that is here is one consciousness, and upon this, right, there is whole Jagat, which, manifests. The manifest Jagat is an appearance, like on the rope, there is snake appearance. Now, 25th. Now, so that means that is everybody, so that means the Jagat that we all see, even though it may not be totally untrue, it is not totally real. So there are a lot of people who have glimpses of the fact that what I see is not totally real. So what they try to do is to inquire into it. So what so many people, there are so many philosophers who try to inquire and find out a little bit more about the world than the eyes can see. So there are different kinds of people who are trying to access the truth, and this verse describes them. Verse number 25. Tarkikarnam tu jiva ishau vacha etau viduhu buddhaha lakshau cha sankhya yogabhyam vedantehi ekyata tayoho. So there are many people who approach, they try to find the truth, and there are some who try to approach it through what? Tarka. Tarka means logic. And what does that mean? Logic means people who use their own perception and inference to come to some, to know some, something more profound about the world than what the eyes can see. So they are essentially relying on their own perception and inference. And what is the problem with that? The problem with that is your perception and inference can only have access to the effect Jagat, the forms. It cannot see the cause, right? The cause of those forms, because it's not available as a given thing. So this is where Even though you can be very, very smart and you can be very intelligent, but you can't, arrive at this truth. Then you have other schools like Sankhya and Yoga, and they are, they are Astika schools. So what it means is they accept the fact that only perception and inference, which is logic, cannot arrive at the truth. So they do accept Veda as a pramana. So that's why they are called Astika schools. But they still have what they make some, so they talk about the cause, and the cause is what twofold. One is Prakriti and the other is Purusha. So two independent causes. So what, that's why it is called Dvaita school. Dvaita school means the cause is not just one, it is two. So what they come to understand, studying at the same text, that what there are two separate causes. Prakriti is Jada, and Purusha is Chaitanya. And what is his creation? Jada and Chaitanya are mixed. And what is moksha for them? That even my being, consciousness is my truth, and physical body, mind, sense complex is part of Prakriti. And Prakriti and Purusha are mixed up. So now what is moksha? When I separate the two, when I understand that consciousness is Purusha and the physical body, mind, sense complex is Prakriti. Now, it may seem like, oh, Vedanta says almost the same thing, but we don't give same order of reality to Prakriti and Purusha. Maya for us is, again, seeing Brahman from its capacity or potential to manifest. There are no two things, right? So this is where they come to the conclusion that there are two separate independent realities. So they come to, this conclusion, which is within Dvaita school. Then what does Vedanta show? Vedanta shows that all that is here is one. So that Brahman, from the standpoint of its capacity to manifest, is the potential. It has the potential without undergoing any change. It can manifest, like without undergoing any intrinsic change. We can create the dream world similarly. So what consciousness, Brahman, Satchidananda Atma, without undergoing any change, has a potential. That potential is called Maya, and this manifestation is the result of the Maya Shakti, which includes knowledge and power to bring into manifestation this creation. So this is how we differ from logicians, we differ from Sankhya and Yoga. So that is highlighted in this verse. Okay. Now, verse number 26. Karya Karana Vachyamsho Jivesho Tau Ajahat Tayoho Cha Lakshau Chit Amshau Eka Rupino. Okay, now here, how do we arrive at what we call oneness? Because we don't have to stop stop seeing the world to come to know the oneness. And also secondly, right, many philosophers find it very, very difficult to accept the fact that Jiva and Ishvara are essentially one, right? So that because there is such a stark difference between who the individual is and what the samashti is, right? So how do you arrive at the oneness? So the process is said to be what we call Bhaga Tyaga Lakshana. What is Bhaga Tyaga Lakshana? So the whole equation, it's this the teaching not only tells you that what you are Brahman, Satyam Dhanam Ananta Brahman, but it also it is also presented in form of an equation. And what is the equation? Tattvamasi. So Tat refers to Ishvara, Tvam refers to you, and then there is an equation. So how is that equation possible? I'm so small and so insignificant. I have only one physical body, one subtle body, and one causal, whereas Ishvara is the Samashti. It is Virat, Hiranyagarbha, and Maya. So how can there be an equation between me and Ishvara? So the method is shown here, and that is what we call Jahal Ajahal Lakshana or Bhagatyaga Lakshana. When you use the word you, and there are one is what we call the immediate meaning of you, which is what the individual with its body, mind, karma, and all of that. And then there is another meaning, which is lakshyartha, which is not any of that, but what there is the essential nature of this individual, which is consciousness. So now, and what about Ishvara? Ishvara as an entity is what all knowledge and all power from which the entire universe comes. That is Samashti Virat, Samashti Hiranyagarbha, and Samashti causal, which is Maya. So from that Ishvara, you take away what? Knowledge and power, and you come to the essential nature of Ishvara. So if you ask, all knowledge also requires the presence of consciousness. So consciousness, Chit, is the Swarupa of Ishvara. So what do? We take out what we call the direct meaning of the word you and Ishvara. And what we come to is the what? Implied meaning of what is you and Ishvara. So in that implied meaning is the equation. In Vachyarthe, so how do you express that in Sanskrit? Vachyarthe bhedaha, lakshyarthe abhedaha. Vachyarthe means as you understand yourself to be, which is this one individual can't be equated to Ishvara. So what is the equation about? You give up this individuality, you retain the essential nature of that individual, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, and from Tatpada, which is Ishvara, you take away the incidental nature, which is all knowledge and all power. Sarvajnaha, Sarvashaktiman, Ishvara, and what you retain is consciousness. So this is what we call Bhagat Tyaga Lakshana. You give up one part and you retain one, and in that lakshyartha is the equation. So through, this is what is very important, it is through Bhagat Tyaga Lakshana that you come to know the truth, right? Even when you take Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, existence as we understand is limited by time. So what do we need to give up? Limited existence in time, and what we have to retain is what? Existence as such, upon which all the objects and even the time and space are superimposed. What is the direct meaning of the word consciousness? You, the individual. So that you have to give up, and just gnaptihi, which is consciousness, because of which, right, this individual is able to know, is retained. And this is what we call Bhagatyaga Lakshana. So Bhagatyaga Lakshana is extensively used to come to know what the teaching is talking about. Now, verse number 27. Karma Shastre Kutah Jnanam Tarke na eva asti nishchayaha Sankhya Yogo Dvidha Apanno Shabdikaha Shabdatat Para. So here, the limitation of, as I had just explained, that tarka is logic, is shown, and that is that what tarka depends upon perception and inference, and perception and inference is only about objects. So that, but what we are trying to figure out is the cause, and it has no access to the cause. So there is an inherent limitation. And what Sankhya and Yoga, they create this duality, right? They are talking about the cause, but there is a distinction between Prakriti and Purusha. So there are two independent reality. Prakriti is Jada, and Purusha is consciousness. And Prakriti is Trigunatmika, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and Purusha is free from these attributes of Prakriti, but they are both independent. So this is something which, is, it has some, suppose you ask a question, how Prakriti, which is Jada, how, it was, there was, what they say is, before the creation, it was in equilibrium, and then that equilibrium got disturbed, and then it joined, that Prakriti joined with Purusha, and then it created this universe. So there could be many questions asked with reference to how can something which is Jada, from equilibrium, it can go into disequilibrium, how it can join with Purusha, how by joining it can create this varied Jagat. So there are many things which cannot be answered with a lot of precision. So this is what it shows, that what Vedanta Shastra is saying is different from these, what they are called Shad Darshanas, different schools, which are Astika schools. So yoga and Sankhya is part of them, but Vedanta goes one step further. So 28, Anye Sarve Pakhandinaha Nana Vartasu Durbalaha Ekam Vedanta Vijnanam Svanubhutya Virajate. So now, how do you know? So this is one big question. How do you know that who's right? Because different people, they are great scholars and they are great thinkers. Now, if we don't agree with them, doesn't mean that they are not right. So how do you establish who has the truth? So in our tradition, right, what was very interesting is that what was decided, the truth was at the center. And what was the assumption that whoever has the truth, right, cannot be contradicted by logic, but whoever is adding their own interpretation and is deviating from the truth, somewhere along the line, what they say falls apart logically. So this is why we have heard many stories of Adi Shankaracharya holding debates with many, many different schools, on the banks of Ganga and everywhere. And he defeats all the other scholars. And, this is such a sophisticated system where truth is at the center. And it is all based on discussions and inquiry, right? And with the premise that whoever has the truth cannot be contradicted, and whoever doesn't have the truth, somewhere along the line, the logic falls apart. So this is what is important to understand, that this is how you distinguish. Now, verse number 29. Aham mama iti ayam bandha na iti aham mama muktata bandha moksha gunaihi bhati gunaha prakriti sambhava. So what he uses little bit of this Sankhya language, but what it says is that what is bandha, what is bondage, and what is moksha. So what the sense of I am, right? And then we don't stop at I am. What do we say? I'm a male, I'm a female, I'm a Indian, I'm a foreigner, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor. So our whatever, so our I am doesn't remain I am, right? So it's so many things get added to my identity. And then there is a further complication. And what is this? Mama. This is my wife. These are my children. This is my house. This is my bank account. This is my wealth. So what all this gets connected with I. So we think through these additions, we want to become bigger. But actually that limitless self, through your identification with a few things, gets small, right? And this is why it is bondage. So it is bondage. And na aham mama iti muktata. When you free your I am, right, as just consciousness as such, and not limit it with all these hundreds of other attributes, that is freedom. Why this addition that we make is bondage? Because it is we have added the gunas, the attributes of that which is Prakriti, which is not really our essential nature, to our essential nature. And we think that through that I will become big, through my bank account, through my family, through my accomplishments, I'll become big. But what we have done is that limitless awareness we have restricted and we have made it insignificantly small. And this is why as long as I put some guna to my aham and mama, then there is always going to be bondage for me. So this is verse number 29. Verse number 30. Gnanam ekam sada bhati sarva avasthasu nirmalam manda bhagyaha na jananti swarupam kevalam prahat. So what happens is, this gnanam, which is consciousness, which is what it is, sadabhati. And now you can say, where is this consciousness? It is sadabhati. So what it is, always with me as what I am, I am, I am. It is self-evident and it is self-effulgent, right? It is self-existent and self-evident. It is always with me, sarva avasthasu, whether I'm transacting with the world in the waking state, or I'm sleeping and I'm not transacting with the world, or during the sleep, I create the dream that this gnanam, which is of the nature of consciousness, it is sadabhati. It is na udeti, na astameti. It does not rise, it does not resolve. It is something which is constant. And what he says, and that is untouched by anything that is, that the waker is doing or a dreamer is doing. But what Adi Shankaracharya ji is saying is that the unwise people do not see this ever-present reality, which is ever shining and which is always with you. Everything else comes and goes, and that which is always invariable in every experience, that is missed, and that is something which is a pity. So that is what they miss the infinite. Now, verse number 31. I'm rushing a little bit because I have 54 more verses to finish, and I have today and next session. So I'm trying to finish at least up to 40 today. Sankalpa sakshi yat jnanam sarvaloka eka jivanam tat eva asmi iti yaha veda saha muktaha na atra samshayaha. Okay, so here he says that I am what, again, as I told you, here the word sakshi is used. So generally we think it's witness of that. So, but otherwise, what happens if you take the meaning of the word witness literally, then what? There is a person who is acting as a witness. So this is not how you have to, who's witnessing what is going on. So there is some action on part of the witness. Here we are talking about that in whose presence everything else gets lit up. That's why there is a lovely example that is given in our tradition. And that is what, there is a plain screen, and on which, right, there is movement of lights. And what does it do? It creates a movie. And you see characters, you see tree, you see mountains, many things happen during the movie. You get all totally identified with the movie. But what you actually forget is these lights, in fact, all the characters that you see are nothing but what? Projection of some lights. And in fact, what is, the white screen is the one which enables what? For all the light to rest on it and then create all these different images. So this is what is the meaning. Consciousness is that one reality upon which the entire Srishti, the entire Jagat is superimposed. And so therefore, it is not one individual seer or a witness, but it is that which allows the whole platform of the universe to exist, and within which all the transactions to take place. So this is what, and the person who sees this reality is muktaha. It is muktaha because that my true nature is this sat and chit. I don't get involved in anything. I'm not a karta, and neither I'm a bhokta. And I'm upon which what all the different kartas and bhoktas depend, and I'm uninvolved, and I'm untouched by anything that, and not only this body, but any other body does. And this is my nature. And this is what makes you free, because your self-identity has moved from being an individual to being Brahman. Okay. Now, verse number 32. Pramata cha pramanam cha prameyam pramitihi tatha yasya bhasa avabhasante manam jnanaya tasya. Okay. So now again, when I say consciousness, then again there is a problem, and that what you think that it is something which is connected to the mind, right? So generally we use the word consciousness as I'm conscious, and this person has become unconscious, I'm conscious of environmental issues. So these are the ways in which we use the word consciousness, which is still connected to our mind, still connected to our abilities and our knowledge and everything. So here there is a method by which the Shruti and even Adi Shankaracharya ji says that when Shastra uses the word, right, consciousness, there is again Bhagatyaga Lakshana. What is Bhagatyaga Lakshana? You have to give up this normal meaning that we give, and you have to go to Lakshartha. What is Lakshartha? What is the intended meaning? The intended meaning of consciousness is that which is truth of Gnata, Gnanam, and Neyam. If I really essentially ask myself, who am I? As I told you, I can have many, many different thoughts, but the content, right? One of the thoughts is, I want to know this, I'm a doer, I'm a thinker, I'm a singer, I'm sitting now. So all these are I-related thoughts. But so that is what Nata, the knower, right? Who's a doer. But what we are talking about when Shastra says you are consciousness, you are Napti Swarupa, it is the truth of all these different thoughts that I have about myself. So it's the content of every thought which is consciousness. But that consciousness is not only it's not only truth of Gnata, it is also the truth of Neyam, object of knowledge. Any object of knowledge, right? Suppose I say pot. Pot itself is nothing but clay. Clay is nothing but atoms. Atoms are nothing but particles. Particles can be further divided into quarks. And it just goes on and on and on until there is no tangible object which remains. It just disappears into concept. And the content of that is what we call consciousness. So that consciousness is the truth of knower. It is the truth of object of knowledge, and it is also the truth of means of knowledge. What is means of knowledge? If I were to know a pot, right, the physical pot doesn't enter my mind. I have to create a vritti, a thought form in form of a pot, and then I recognize that and I say, oh, this is pot. Even if I want to know some advanced, mathematics or any other discipline, I have to create corresponding thought. So the content, this is called means of knowledge, Gnanam, Gnata, Neyam, and Gnanam. Any thought I create, whether it is about physics or about mathematics or about Vedic studies or anything, the content, right? In order to understand anything, I have to create corresponding thought in my mind. And the content of that thought is consciousness. So the consciousness that Vedanta is talking about, Shruti is talking about, is what? The truth of the knower, the object of knowledge, and means of knowledge. That's why it is limitless and it is all pervading. This is number 32. Artha akaraha bhavet vrittihi halena arthaha prakashate artha jnanam vijanati saha eva para arthaha. Okay, so as I told you that any object that you know, how will you know a tree? You have to create a tree thought, right? And then you recognize that tree thought. Then suppose you want to know a sun, you have to create a sun thought, because the physical objects don't enter. And what is this consciousness? The consciousness is the truth of tree thought, the truth of sun thought. You have hundreds of different thoughts. Some thoughts have subject matter. I am good, I am bad, I am fat, I'm Indian, whatever. All these thoughts where subject is I am, and so many thoughts is about this is sun, this is moon, this is a tree, right? All these thoughts, there are so many different thoughts, and this consciousness is what content of every thought. There is no knowledge or no object. You can't get to know any object without creating a vritti. And the content of that vritti is consciousness. So the consciousness is the truth of every thought that you have, whether it is I-related thought or it is object-related thought. Every thought requires consciousness. So, and that is what is the final truth about it, in which the whole world gets illumined. The I gets illumined, your little I gets illumined, and the world gets illumined. Verse number 34. Vritti vyaptaptvam eva astu phala vyaptihi katham bhaved svaprakasha swarupatvat siddhatvat cha chidatmanaha. Okay, so now if you want to know everything, now the question is how, if you want to know anything, and then as I told you, you have to think about that thing, and there are two operations. What are the two operations? One is called vritti vyapti and the other is called phala vyapti. So what is that? Vritti exists, and so that vritti exists, and what does it do? It removes the ignorance of a thing. That is called vritti vyapti. And what is phala vyapti? The phala is that particular form. Your thought has taken that particular form. So what right now your thought takes a tree form. If you want to know the tree, it takes a fish form. If you want to know this fish, so that means what? In knowing of anything, there are two operations. One is vritti vyapti and the other is phala vyapti. Now, to know the nature of the self, then there is no object like fish or tree. How will you create? So that means how do you know the self? Right? Because it cannot be objectified. It's not any given object. Your mind cannot collapse it as something which is this, right? Then how would you ever know the nature of reality? And without vritti, there is no knowledge which takes place. So there is this amazing thing which Shruti reveals, that there is a special type of vritti in knowing this self. And this is called akhandakara vritti, brahmakara vritti. And what is that? There is a vritti, and what does it do? It removes the ignorance of who you are, once and for all. And after that, this ignorance cannot come back. But so there is a vritti vyapti, but it doesn't have phala vyapti. Why? Because Atma cannot be collapsed as in a given form as a tree or a fish or a sun or moon. So therefore, there is no corresponding form because it's formless. It's the limitless reality. So what is this akhandakara vritti? That vritti comes like any other vritti. It doesn't have a form, but that vritti does one function. And what does it do? It removes the ignorance once and for all. And only when that vritti, akhandakara vritti, has taken place, from then on, the person is called a Brahmavid. Until then, the person is still pursuing knowledge, and the person is called Jignasu. So that vritti is, the nature of that vritti is described as having vritti vyapti, but not phala vyapti. Number 35. Arthat artha antare Vrittihi gantum chalati cha antare niradhara nirvikara ya dasha sa unmani smrita. So here, what this okay. Now, what it means is that we all get a glimpse of what is consciousness. So what, as I just explained to you, that while the thought exists, consciousness is there as is content. Then also when there is silence, then what there is a consciousness. So consciousness is the invariable in thought as well as in silence. So that means suppose somebody explains to you, then what happens is you begin to get a certain grasp. But at the time of knowledge, what happens is you come to know that I am. So after that, there is no memory involved. So many people ask this question, okay, I understand I'm consciousness, but how do I retain this vision? I seem to forget this reality about myself when I transact with the world. Again, I come back to me being the individual. So once the knowledge takes place, there is what the person is established, because what has the vritti done? It has removed ignorance once and for all. There is no coming and going. One never commits the mistake again. So the person is well established in this knowledge once this akhandakara vritti has taken place. Okay. Now, verse number 36. Chittam chittacha vijaniyat takara rahitam yada takaraha Vishayaha adhyasaha japa ragaha yatha mano. So here it is interesting way of showing that what chitta is the mind, and mind has what different the things, it thinks about things. There are many different thoughts that it has. So okay, there are 5 more minutes that I have. So here what is talked about is, this analogy, which is a beautiful analogy. One is what? Crystal. And then suppose you put red cloth behind the crystal. Crystal appears red. Then you move the red cloth and you put blue cloth behind. Crystal appears blue. So what does it mean? So these red cloth and blue cloth are called different upadhis. They give their appearance to the crystal, and crystal is called upahita, that which as though takes on these attributes without ever taking them. Crystal always remains clear. So similarly, all this chittata, the thoughts are like what upadhi. They make consciousness appear as though it is of this particular nature. But consciousness is upahita. It is like crystal. It never takes on any attribute of thought. It remains always pure and always untouched by any thought that one could have. So this is what that chittata, that ta refers to any addition that we do in terms of form. That is not your true nature. Only chit, which is consciousness, is your true nature. So that is what the wise person understands. So that means from then on, the wise person never makes or never defines oneself by the nature of the mind, because the difference between the two is very clear. One is mithya, the other is satyam. There is no physical distance. While thought cannot exist without consciousness, consciousness is independent of being thought. So that is understood. 37. Gneya vastu parityagat jnanam tishtati kevalam triputi kshina tam eti brahma nirvana ruchati. So what does it mean now? The person has given up triputi. What is this triputi? the Gnata, Gnanam, and Gneyam. The knower, the object of knowledge, and means of knowledge, which is Vritti, and what one understands oneself to be is the Gnapti Swarupaha. Gnapti Swarupaha is the invariable in all three, which is consciousness, and all three are superimposed. All three are Upadhis, and Upahita is consciousness. So this is what not only your thoughts, but the entire universe, which includes the knower, object of knowledge, and many, many different means of knowledge. The entire universe is superimposed on this Gnaptihi, which is consciousness as such. 38. Do I have time for it? Can I do one more?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Mano matram idam sarvam tat manaha gnana matrakam agnanam brahmaha iti ahuhu vignanam paramam padam. Okay. So what is interesting is now we have seen that both the knowledge object, the knower, object of knowledge, and means of knowledge are all consciousness. Somebody can ask, then what about ignorance, right? What is the source of ignorance? So this is also what source of ignorance is also consciousness. So what does it mean? I know what I don't know. So I can say, I don't know Chinese, or I don't know Spanish, or I don't know Telugu, whatever, whichever language. So what does it mean? There is this consciousness in whose presence I also know ignorance. Not only I know the presence of things, but also I know of that ignorance. So even ignorance is something which is within consciousness. So ignorance can be removed by vritti gnanam, but both of them are sustained by consciousness. I know I did not know Sanskrit earlier, but I joined this course and I know Sanskrit. I know I don't know, and now I know that I know. So what consciousness is that which lights up ignorance as well as knowledge. So it's also the truth of ignorance also. It is not opposed to ignorance. This is why in the presence of consciousness, our ignorance can go on and on and on until we decide to remove it. And for removing it, we need Ishvara Anugraha and we need Shastra Pramana. So this is something which is explained in verse number 38. So maybe I have to end it here. I couldn't do 2 more verses, which I wanted to do, but I'll try to do it next time.
Thank you very much, Neema ji. There is a lot of food for thought and reflection. I think many viewers will be going back and listening to the recording again and again, because this text, the nature of text is itself a manana and a nididhyasa text. So thank you for a wonderful, fascinating explanation of that text. We don't have time to take questions, but I think perhaps quickly you can answer 1 or 2 questions. One question is, please elaborate how vritti vyapti removes ignorance and how content of thought is consciousness, because thought is the cause of ignorance. So how thought is made up of consciousness?
So suppose I ask you, think of a tree, and you think, suppose, right, can you think of a tree without the presence of consciousness? It is not possible. In order to think of anything, you need the presence. It presupposes the presence of consciousness. So this is why in the pot and clay analogy, pot is a form and clay is a content. Thought is a form, a content of every thought is consciousness. So this consciousness is the content. But what happens is we only pay attention to forms and we forget the content. And this is why you need Shastra, which points out the content of everything, which is this consciousness. And where is this consciousness? In your buddhi, as I am, I am, I am. But what is the mistake we make? That I am gets connected to hundreds of attributes of your own body and mind, and so you need Shastra to figure out what is your true nature.
Thank you, Neema ji. One last question quickly. how can we separate ourselves from the ignorance in daily life?
In daily life, okay. So in daily life, Vedanta has it's a very full tradition. So there is Yoga Shastra, which I talked about, where in Bhagavad Gita and even in some Upanishad, extensively, even here in Sadachara, Adi Shankaracharya was talking about how Agnihotra can be converted into contemplation, or your prayers, or looking at the sun and asking for clarity in thinking, how to handle your raga dvesha. So there is a lot of, our not understanding the reality makes us small and insignificant. And from there comes a lot of other problems, like our decision making goes haywire, we don't have resilience, our emotional life is impacted, our self-image is impacted. So all these are all ramifications of ignorance. So you can start taking care of them. And that is going to change your daily life, really. And it is a very important part of learning.
Thank you again, Neema ji. With this, viewers, we come to a conclusion of this session. Tomorrow morning, we have a third session on Shankara Charitram, a modern retelling by Ramesh Venkatraman. So join us tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.